one for the one and only DNVR. Two goes out to Zach, Mace, RK, and the bar. Three for Mr. B in that old trophy case. Number four still waiting for, well, bring on the chase. Out on the field at Mile High, Broncos win is our desire. Coupled with Breck, Brew, and a friend, bleed orange and blue to the bitter end. Come and join us, DNVR. We are DNVR.
Welcome into the DMVR Broncos podcast. That guy, if you're watching live, pumping his fist a little bit, Andre Simone. A busy man today, Andre, because you just did the DMVR Bets podcast. Now you're jumping in here with me for Ryan Koenigsberg, who, in the words of the late, great Irv Brown, is on assignment today.
That's right. Yeah, no, this is a pleasure. I did it with Zach yesterday. I got to do it with you today.
Yeah.
Nothing better.
Is there a lot kind of pent up right now about Broncos camp for you?
Not really. No.
That's a great way to start the show.
No, there's some real liberation in letting you guys worry about that. I did make this mistake, Mace. I told myself I'm not going to read too much into camp. I'm going to reserve my feelings for the first preseason game.
Okay, that's fair. We're going to get into that real quick. Of course, this podcast, the DMVR Broncos podcast, is brought to you by MSU Denver Online. Time and time again, the one thing that'll protect you against economic concerns is an education that will allow you to adapt into varying careers and can go and build your toolbox at MSU Denver. MSU Denver Online puts a dynamic education at your fingertips without forcing you to decide between earning a degree and living your life. MSU Denver is the Colorado institution providing rigorous and affordable online programs taught by professors who bring the real world right into the classroom. And MSU Denver graduates use their relevant degrees to land coveted jobs. You know, we know a lot of MSU Denver grads around the area. Some of my best friends in this area are proud MSU Denver Roadrunners, MSU Denver grads, and they've accomplished some great things. And some of our own very own staff members at DNVR are taking MSU Denver or online courses this summer. So check out MSU Denver Online. On campus or online, it's all the same to them because their students do just as well online as they do in the in-person courses, which means you can get that same degree and continue to live your life.
What a deal.
And the Broncos, they want to live their best life at quarterback.
Yeah.
And so far, the results have been decidedly mixed.
Yep.
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
But Vic Fangio, after practice today, said, when asked whether a decision was close, he said, yeah, quote, pretty damn close, unquote, to a decision. But, quote, more information coming, unquote. Referring to, potentially, that Seattle preseason game this coming Saturday night up at Lumen Field in Seattle. So, if the decision is pretty damn close, we have to ask ourselves, first of all, A, who do you think it is? And B, what is it based on?
Right. And surprising to hear after yesterday's practice, a quote-unquote lethargic outing from the offense. That's a direct quote from Vic Fangio.
A lot of drop passes. It was pretty inexcusable, really, considering that they had a day off on Sunday. Monday was kind of a three-quarter speed, regular season type of practice, scout team, etc. Disappointed. I think he was really disappointed they didn't really get at it on Tuesday. As a team, they got at it more today.
Okay, good.
So the tempo was back. Offensive execution, on the other hand, fewer drops, but still kind of bulky at times today.
So they're again not seeming to be on the same page with the wideouts. That seemed to be kind of the overwhelming theme of the biggest issue the offense was having yesterday.
Yeah, and in particular, the one interception today was thrown by Teddy Bridgewater, but it looked like you saw Jerry Jeudy kind of stop. Every sign from that play was miscommunication.
Right.
And when Bridgewater was asked about after practice, said, hey, we'll just get back in the film room, study that, and work on it. So not get back on the field, get back in the film room, which tells you it was less of an execution thing and more of a communication thing.
Right.
And it was also Teddy was throwing to a spot.
Right.
And so when a quarterback is thrown to a spot and it's a pick, and this was true for some of Drew's picks as well last year, it's on the quarterback or it's on the receiver. If other picks, they're on the quarterback.
Right.
So
right. Well, so did we see enough after a lethargic Tuesday on Wednesday are you surprised that Vic would say there's this separation?
Well, I'm not separation, but a
closer
decision.
to a decision. Yes.
Yes. The reason I am not surprised is this, and it's because of what he said about a moment later. And he was asked about the impact of the preseason games. All along, Vic Fangio has said preseason games are the most important thing that determines competition. Mm-hmm. Well, they go out there for the preseason game last Saturday against Minnesota, and Stephen Weatherly is the only starter. And actually, you could say he maybe isn't one of their best 11 defensive players on the team because Sheldon Richardson is, and he's not listed as a starter.
Right.
And Richardson, by the way, was wrecking people last week. Mm-hmm. So just to kind of underscore what kind of impact he has and how him not being out there certainly helped the Broncos.
Yeah.
So he then Fangio said that the joint practice work, when you did see 1-versus-1, when you did work against the Vikings' first-team defense was, quote, telling, unquote, and said that 1-versus-1 in the practices at UCL Training Center, also telling. So what this says to me is that while he wanted to have the preseason games be the biggest thing, the situation has changed, and now he's had to adapt because you didn't see the starting defense for Minnesota on Saturday. You will not see the starting defense from the Los Angeles Rams in the third preseason game because Sean McVay is doing his usual Sean McVay thing and not playing any starters all preseason.
And the final preseason game.
And Seattle, that is TBD.
Yeah.
And everyone of note rested last week when the Seahawks played in Las Vegas. And do you really think that Pete Carrolls is going to put all of his aces out there on defense on Saturday night? I mean, there's no way Jamal Adams is going to play.
Right.
For example. I mean, you'd imagine he'd just say, nope, we're good.
Yeah, you might see some ones who would be twos most places and are why the Seahawks defense isn't highly rated.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. That's another thing.
Some fringe ones that would be two other places, but they have to start them, so they better get their reps.
This is the team that has the worst number one defense of any on the Broncos preseason schedule.
Yeah, damn
I mean,
straight.
the Vikings don't have depth, but they've got some good players in that first team. They've got Bashad Breeland, Patrick Peterson,
Sheldon
Eric
Richardson.
Kendrick, Sheldon Richardson.
Yeah, they're tough
Daniil
on the
Hunter.
D line. Yeah, Anthony Barr. Right.
Yeah, it's a defense that's got playmakers at all three levels. Minnesota's problem is depth, and you saw on Saturday, and when they went up, and even in the practices, that's again practice being telling. When they went up against the twos, it was a different matter. When they went up against the ones, it was a struggle. And so you take, for example, Drew Lock's work last week. First, he gets 2 move the ball periods, and Vikings first teamers are out there for both of those periods, and he's going against them. On Wednesday, ends in a throw across the middle that he'd rather have back tipped and then intercepted, tipped off a defender and then picked off.
Yeah.
Thursday, moved the ball. Royce Freeman runs for a first down. After that, turnover on downs. Drew Lock goes 1 for 3. And that's why, as well as he played on Saturday, I felt like I was the negative Nancy in the room, but I couldn't divorce what I saw in the practices from what I saw in the game for both Teddy and Drew, because Teddy was throwing through a red zone pick in 7-on-7. He had a red zone pick in team, although in fairness, Melvin Gordon had it in his hands, and it was a low pass, but it was in Gordon's hands and went off his hands. So Teddy struggled in the red zone against the Vikings once. On Saturday, he does great in the red zone.
Yeah, right.
Drew Lock struggled against the Vikings once in practice. He goes up against the Vikings second and third teamers in the game and deals.
Yeah.
And so I think when Vic is saying this, Dre, he's saying, I've recalibrated this a little bit, and now this is really going to be about those joint practices. And hopefully if Seattle plays some first-teamers about that too, maybe that's the more information.
Right. Well, what's crazy is all that makes sense, and I could see how this preseason would force you to recalibrate. Because just watching a large amount of the preseason slate, Broncos seem to really stand out as a team that played more starters than just about anyone.
Some teams are like Kansas City got a few starters in.
Yeah,
They're going to have their starters play the first half this weekend. But we're seeing it's when the Rams started 2 years ago. Remember when Sean McVay said, "I'm resting my starters" the entire preseason? Everyone's like, "Whoa!"
Right.
But
it's the.
I also
normal.
thought when I did a podcast back then, not here. I was still with the Broncos, and I said, "This is something that we're probably going to see more of in the coming years."
Yep.
Now, of course, it got put on ice last year, no preseason, but now we're seeing more of it. The other thing is the Broncos. It's no fault of their own, but they drew the short straw here because last week. The top 3 teams in terms of resting players were the Rams, Vikings, and Seahawks.
Yeah, it's not great when you're trying to put in work. So I can understand Vic, but what I don't understand, what's confusing me here, Mace, is from what you described of those joint practices, that doesn't sound like an assessment that would allow me to come closer to a decision.
No.
So what's Vic talking about now?
I mean, if you start stepping back and saying, "All right, well, Teddy," you start measuring other things. I mentioned the Teddy pick in 7-on-7, and I mentioned the other struggles in red zone. And Kendricks nearly had another pick in 7-on-7, and that was against Viking ones. Teddy also led the offense to a touchdown in team against Minnesota's ones. Now, that being said, in game conditions, I'm not sure that touchdown pass to Jerry Jeudy last Wednesday happens because Nick Vigil is coming up the A-gap, and literally you can see on the video the Broncos put up, you can literally see Nick Vigil put his arms back and stop to avoid hitting Teddy Bridgewater. So does that happen in a game? Well, if Teddy's willing to take a shot, it might happen in a game.
Yeah. So then does it come down to the low Melvin Gordon pass that was intercepted, but you could argue was actually dropped? And
well, then the other
that's your separator?
The other factor is first team versus first team in Broncos practices. And
right, so let's talk about that because that's the advantage of having you. You've been out there all day, every day. You haven't missed anything.
Yes. Well, I missed the ones. I missed the ones where I was covering the Hall of Fame. And if there's one thing that gives it to Drew Lock, it is this. Especially early on that Sunday scrimmage that was in the fieldhouse, got moved inside because of the bad air quality of that day, that Bridgewater did better in the second part of it, but Drew Lock did better in the first part of it and had that deep strike to Cortland Sutton. So is that something that tilts the scales toward Drew Lock that day? Because you can step back and look at the broad spectrum, and let's say you give Bridgewater the benefit of the doubt for that on that touchdown to Jerry Jeudy and move the ball in Minnesota.
Right.
If you give him the benefit of the doubt, then it's still counterbalanced by what went wrong for him the next day.
Yeah.
And especially when they've said Vic Fangio, another thing he's said is situational football is the most important thing. So we're talking about red zone and we're talking about move the ball 2 minute.
That's right. That's right.
And
execution on third down.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, and if they're tied on all counts, in my opinion, you play Drew Lock.
Yeah.
Because you go with the upside factor. If
Absolutely.
If it were up to me, they're tied on all counts. You go with the guy who has the better chance of being a long-term answer. It may not be, Drew Lock may not have a great chance of being a long-term quarterback. I mean, I don't think we're talking about him being 75%. Historically, probably in the third, in terms of percentage of him being a long-term top 10, top 12 quarterback, probably in the 30s.
Yeah, sure.
Based on other quarterbacks that had similar form to this point in his career, it's 31%. But that is still more of a chance than Teddy Bridgewater has.
Absolutely.
And we have seen Drew Lock do things better. That throw that he made to Jerry Jeudy, yes, it's against the twos when Judy's a third read. And on Saturday, yes, it's against scrubs.
Right.
But that is not a play that he had the patience to make last year.
Absolutely.
Because you've got to stand in there, and it's great protection, so credit to the offensive line. But you have to stand in there and wait for that read to be there. And he does, and he made it. Could he have maybe read it a little bit quicker and got it to Jeudy quicker? Yeah, but
sure.
You're not complaining about it. You gave your playmaker a chance to make a play. And ultimately, that's probably the most important thing for these quarterbacks beyond avoiding mistakes is give this terrific collection of playmakers
Yeah.
a chance to do something.
Yeah. I mean, looking at that way, it's hard not to. And are you starting to worry that maybe in the event of the tie, while most people would agree with you that in a tie, the tie should go to Drew Lock because of the upside. And it isn't just, it's not, upside can be such a funny thing.
But who's more likely to get better from where they are?
Exactly.
On their trajectory.
Exactly.
And it's, I mean, if you were doing insurance, you go with actuarial tables that say, okay, well,
Right.
I mean, you would make a calculated decision here.
Yes.
And ultimately, if you make a calculated decision, if these two are equal, you go with the younger guy who in camp has shown that while he hasn't gotten everything, he still struggles when pressure is on him. There were, there were a couple of plays that broke down today because of pressure from McTelvin, Najim, and Draymond Jones, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. But he is doing things in terms of going through his progressions better than he did all of last year. So he has made some strides.
Yes.
And there's a little quote that Teddy put out there today. By the way, Teddy Bridgewater, if you watch that press conference today, he might be the most magnanimous football player I've ever come across.
Right.
As far as, everything about the team, don't want to put everyone else's deal in jeopardy just for my own sake, blah, blah, blah. But he said something at the end. I actually asked him about Drew Lock. Hey, you've been around him for a few months. What's kind of surprised you about him, that you've learned about him? And he said, quote, thirst for knowledge, unquote. Which is another,
Love to hear that.
Which is a good sign. You do like, I don't want to make too much of press conference sound bites, but you do like to hear that. And Teddy seems like a pretty honest guy.
Yeah. Well, and it lines up with some of the other stuff we've heard, and just knowing Drew, he does seem like a professional guy. The upside, though, is there on a play-by-play basis. Like, on any given play, Drew Lock is much more likely to be able to make a big play for you versus Teddy Bridgewater. And that's where, I mean, if you're just trying to mine your margins of victory, having a quarterback who can pull off 1, 2, 3, 4 big plays a game is going to give you a much bigger advantage than a guy who can only pull off half to one,
But then it also becomes a mistake thing.
Exactly.
Because the other thing that affects you in terms of your chances of winning is what is the percentage if that first turnover, your percentage chance of win drops by about 25%, just like that.
Yeah, just handing a possession over can really be detrimental like that.
And Drew Lock has had some mistakes. Teddy Bridgewater's had some mistakes too.
Right.
In 1-versus-1, and he had that bad day in the red zone on the first Saturday of training camp. In fact, I look back at that day, that Saturday, and when he just basically melted down, and that was one of Teddy's chances to kind of take this thing and grab it by the throat, and he didn't do it.
Yeah.
He had a chance last Thursday to take this thing and grab it by the throat, and he didn't do it. And in both instances, Dre, it was red zone. And we know red zone, it's an issue for him. Last year, his passer rating, I believe, was 28th in the red zone. Yeah, now, he does bring the element with his legs, and we saw that on the touchdown that got called back on Saturday. But that's kind of his Achilles heel here. And the chances he's had to take this competition and build some momentum, he's squandered them.
Right.
And Drew Lock, because he has more zip, he throws better passes in the red zone, even though he has not been immune from red zone mistakes. He had that one where he threw it to Justin Simmons and moved the ball that day that you had that pick, and then you had the pick that Teddy threw where Brandon Mack ran the wrong route.
Right.
But both of these guys, whenever they've had a chance to kind of sustain something, they've put the brakes on themselves. And that's the most frustrating thing watching this, is that you don't see 2 consecutive days. Like, I've been doing the golf scorecard from time to time.
Right.
You know what's missing for each of these guys? A couple of birdies in a row.
Yep. Sustained momentum is just not there.
You could say Drew Lock had an eagle on Saturday, and Teddy, playing reasonably well, had a birdie.
Right. Yep.
What did they do in the next training camp style practice yesterday? At best, par for both.
Right. If that. Yeah. Right.
I mean, I just wrote the word I put on the front of the DNVR.com to promote my story was meh.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Yep. It was meh yesterday.
Well, I just think this is so interesting, but everything we've said does not explain to me why Vic today would say we're getting closer to a decision, or why he would give the caveat of, look, we're having to adjust our evaluation. Preseason's going to matter less. Scrimmages are going to matter more.
Yeah.
The layman in me would say, it sure sounds like he's leaning Teddy Bridgewater and making excuses. Huh?
If he had said the games still matter, the games matter a lot, I think we'd be having a different conversation right now.
Right.
But when he said that the joint practices were telling, and the one on the first team versus first team work in practice was telling, in light of the Vikings resting their starters. I mean, that's an alarm bell.
The official QB scoreboard had Drew and Teddy dead even after the 3 joint practices.
Yes, or they were at the 2 joint practices, they were 10-10.
Yeah.
Yes.
I said 3, not 2.
Well,
right.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And and by the way, our scoreboard for today, Zach will have today's update. But as of yesterday, our scoreboard had these two differentiated by 1 point, 75.5 to 74.5 in Bridgewater's favor.
Yeah, and I think that's spot on.
Thank you.
I don't think there's any...
This is the problem. We didn't want spot on. We wanted one guy to separate, and dadgummit, it didn't happen.
No, it's happened less and less.
And they both had chances to separate, and they've both just... It hasn't been there.
It's crazy.
That's the most. If there's a disappointing thing about this, it's that neither one of these guys separated when they had a chance.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Well, speaking of our cover, if you want to read those quarterback scoreboards, check out becoming a member of the DNVR.com. But of course, becoming a DNVR member, it's not just about reading our on-site stuff for the Broncos, being at every game, every practice, being at the Hall of Fame in Canton. It's not just about that. It's also about the coverage of all the Denver teams. It's also about hanging out in the Discord with Denver sports fans to have good sports talk about your teams without the crap you deal with on social media. It's about the deal you get if you're a DNVR member. You can join the DNVR Golf League. You get extra raffle tickets at watch parties. You're going to want to come on down to our Broncos watch parties, by the way. We've got one coming up Saturday night for the Seahawks game. And what better way to watch a preseason game, Dre, than by coming on out to a place like the DNVR bar and having some fun, because we know in the second half those preseason games can get a little tough to watch.
It's a great point.
So you want to have a good time, and you'll have a good time at the DNVR bar. But if you're a DNVR member, you get that free DNVR shirt with your annual membership. You get weekly member deals on merchandise in the DNVR Locker. We got some Broncos stuff dropping here in the next few weeks, so stay tuned for that. A big beer for the price of a small beer, and also you can host your fantasy football parties at the DNVR bar, not just for members, but for everyone. So you sign up to host your party at this bar, the greatest sports bar in town. You get 2 free pictures of beer, 1 Breck beer picture of your choice, and 1 draft beer of your choice. All you need to do is call the bar from 3 p.m. or later, or the easiest way is to email gm@thednvrbar.com. That's gm@thednvrbar.com to have your fantasy football draft here. And of course, if you come on down to the DNVR bar, you can have some of those delicious Breckenridge brews. They're all on tap here at the DNVR bar. We love our Breck brews. We also love the fact that this summer they're teaming up with the National Parks Conservation Association to donate 1% of all their profits this summer. The National Parks Conservation Association do a lot of helpful things with our great outdoors. And, of course, last year, with all the wildfires in Colorado that were so devastating, Breck Brew and the National Parks Conservation Association want to give back. So make sure you have some of those Breck Brews at the DNVR bar or elsewhere. 1% of profits go to help our great outdoors. And also, if if you want to check out the DNVR bar and find out about the Escape Pod trailer, you can enter to win. By the way, you don't have to come to the DNVR bar. My bad. It's breckbrew.com/ingoodco for that $30,000 Escape Pod trailer. Sign up to win that. That's breckbrew.com/ingoodco for more details on that $30,000 Escape Pod trailer. Make sure you tag us when you enter. Also, DraftKings. I want to tell you about DraftKings because everyone's favorite time of year is around the corner. College football season. Yes, the NFL matters, but college football does too. And to celebrate, DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook, is putting new players in the center of the action with $200 in free bets instantly.
Incredible.
If you bet $1 or more on any college football game. Take advantage of this limited-time offer now. You heard it right. DraftKings is giving all new players 200 smackers in free bets instantly when you place a bet of $1 or more on any college football game, no matter what. So go to the DraftKings Sportsbook now. Check out all of the great promotions and daily odds boosts they offer. DraftKings Sportsbook is safe, secure, and reliable. Located right here in the U.S., so it's easy to deposit and withdraw your money at your convenience. Check that out at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's new customers only, limited time only, must be 21 or older, Colorado only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700. All right.
Boom.
Let's talk a little bit about other things going on beyond the quarterback. But first of all, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You'd start Drew Lock, right? Or would you start Teddy?
I would start Drew Lock,
Okay.
yes.
If they're equal, I'd start Drew Lock.
Yeah.
But the thing is, what are they weighing? They're probably weighing pre-snap stuff. They're
Yes,
weighing
yes.
they're weighing leadership. They're weighing knowledge of the offense, etc. So it's not just obviously our scorecard I think is illuminating, but it doesn't reveal everything.
Right, and what the coaches are looking for.
Right. So here we go.
You do wonder if Teddy just fits that like Alex Smith mold that I do. I just keep going back to that. Those Jim Harbaugh, Alex Smith with Colin Kaepernick as the backup and Vic's the DC. And, they won a lot of games, scoring a lot of field goals. I think their kicker scored the most points in NFL history that year.
And you remember Cap came in midway through 2012 after he'd been watching Alex Smith operate for a while and took him all the way to the Super Bowl.
Right. Then the next year. Yeah, exactly.
So that's not a bad comparison there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Get back to another guy who jumped out today.
Yeah.
And that's Draymond Jones. And
That's exciting.
This is happening over and over again for Draymond Jones. And I think most significantly, it also happened in Minnesota as well. I was not watching the Vikings offense versus the Broncos defense because obviously we had to keep our eyes on the quarterbacks. What I did notice when I did put my binoculars over to that far field was Draymond Jones in the backfield on a consistent basis. And I can tell you, internally, the Broncos are very excited about Draymond Jones. Do not be surprised if he has that third-year breakthrough the way that a guy who was here last year only played 3 games before he got hurt, Jarrell Casey did when he went and made a leap from a guy who was a 2-3 sack a year guy in Tennessee to being a 10-sack guy in his third season. And by the way, a guy who saw that firsthand is in the Broncos building right now. That's Mike Munchak, then the Titans head coach, now the Broncos O-line coach. So they have an idea of what type of jump Draymond Jones can make and what they want it to look like. And it looks a lot like Jarrell Casey making that jump several years ago.
Third or fourth year often where you see that jump. Derek Wolfe, Malik Jackson, Justin Simmons, guys that stand out to me, all who broke out right around that range. Yeah, I've always been high on Draymond. I loved what he was doing at Ohio State, and for a couple years I feared that I overranked him, but I'm expecting big things, and I think even the way they address the interior defensive line this offseason really showed that they are counting on Draymond to be a foundational piece in the trenches for them.
I mean, they keep Shelby Harris, and of course, they re-signed Mike Purcell last year. But Mike Purcell's a nose tackle, so he's not going to have many reps.
Part-time
and Shelby
player.
Harris is a good complement to Draymond Jones. And then they signed Shamar Stephen for depth. The other element of that, McTelvin Agim, is another guy who had multiple pressures today. And there was one where he just ripped past Dalton Reisner.
That's exciting.
And got to Drew Lock and forced an incompletion. It's exciting to see for McTelvin Agim. It's not exciting to see for Dalton Reisner, who was having a rough go of it today in pass pro.
what's this interior offensive line? There's lots of depth, and yet are the veterans letting the young guys kind of, you were saying the quarterbacks, it's been frustrating. No one's been able to capitalize on those opportunities. Sounds like Minerts, Cushenberry, and especially Moody really being able to step up.
Yeah, Cushenberry, I think, has stabilized things at center.
You love to hear that.
Yeah, and that's great news. There were some rough moments, but he's having fewer plays where he's getting beat off the snap. So he's snapping, he's getting set quickly. He's able to protect there, and he's also identifying A-gap blitzes better.
Yeah.
Than he had. And that was something that was an issue last year. The quarterback works hand in hand with him as well. Yeah. And that's where Drew being another year older and Teddy Bridgewater being in the buildings probably helped out Lloyd Cushenberry a great deal. But yesterday when they had moved the ball, it was first team offense out there. But you looked at the guard spots and you saw Quinn Miners at left guard and Netani Muti at right guard.
That's crazy.
And we saw Netani Muti get some work today at right guard, giving Graham Glasgow a little bit of a breather. Those young guys are pushing right now. Now, maybe
quite literally.
Yes. Now the thing with Glasgow's contract means he's going to be on this team this year unless you trade him.
Yeah.
But Muti in particular, I don't think Miners is going to be ready for extensive work just yet, but it's interesting to kind of look beyond the horizon and see Miners getting that period on the first team. But Muti working in there is really interesting because you can see a path to him starting next year easily.
Right.
But what if he makes that push this year? Muti is so strong off the snap.
Yeah.
So powerful. He's basically he's saying, I dare you to bench me. I dare you.
Man, I mean, if it wasn't for the injuries, he would have been a high pick. He played some left tackle at Fresno, and he could really dominate. I remember
some of the film was silly on him.
Oh yeah,
driving guys downfield.
I remember against USC. Fresno hasn't been very good, but he was doing it at all levels. But I think it's so encouraging. Minerts coming from Division III, not playing football last year, aside from the Senior Bowl, already being able to get first team reps. It
was one period. Don't put too much in.
Sure, but that's encouraging. That's a guy who's progressing pretty rapidly.
They're starting to cross train as well because he had a lot of work at center, but now you're seeing him work at guard.
Yeah,
and like you're seeing Austin Schlotman get some center reps as well. So they're trying to figure out kind of the depth there, but that's a really encouraging sign for him. Just where he started camp and where he is. And I thought he had a solid game on Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Kale, do we have any interesting comments today? Let's dive in.
There was a comment that came in right here from Jules. At what point would you start negotiating new contracts to reach agreements with Sutton, Chubb, etc.? And who would you let go not resign after the season as of now?
Ooh, good question. I am one who always believes you should start doing things earlier rather than later.
Yep.
Now, with Chubb and Sutton, the interesting thing is you both have injury concerns on these two. Now, Chubb, you have time because you've already given him the franchise tag. So Chubb's a little bit lower priority. Cortland Sutton, I think you wait on him until you know he's all the way back.
Yeah.
And watching him, yesterday was a rough day. He had a couple he had a drop of a Teddy pass in the end zone in a red zone period, and Teddy just threads the needle perfectly past a couple of defenders, and it just bounces off his hands. Sutton's got to catch that. You expect him to catch that.
Yeah.
So, and also you look at him sometimes, he's still not all the way back in terms of his movement just yet. So I would just wait on Sutton and see kind of where he is. With Chubb, let's say he gets off to a great start and there's no problem with the knee this year. Then I think maybe you start thinking, okay, do we tear up this fifth-year option and just give you a longer-term deal?
Right.
So, yeah, good question. What else we got, Kale?
A couple coming in here.
Okay.
Mace, what was your opinion on the Shermer-Lock issue yesterday?
Oh, yeah.
Total nothing burger.
Yeah. You want to give a little background on that?
Yeah, it was funny because I didn't really notice it at first because I was making my notes on the play that happened, and and Drew explained it today. Like it was a mix-up because I looked at my notes. I'm like, they got the reps they were supposed to get because that period, that 7-on-7 period, they were doing their reps in clusters of 3s. And so I'm like, oh, well, they both got the reps they were supposed to. So it turned out Drew kind of was expecting to go back in for another rep. I guess he just kind of misread it, and then Teddy kind of goes in there. And then there was a little bit of a conversation, but nothing nothing to where I'm thinking, oh my gosh, burn the house down because of this. The voices did get a little bit raised, but you hear worse all the time.
Yeah,
I mean,
'tis football.
Yeah, so I think if there's a frustration, it's that if Pat Shurmur has a frustration, it's that okay, hey Drew, you knew the script, and why were you going back in there? Drew probably just went in there because of force of habit. I don't think this is a big deal. Let's put it this way. I hope it's not a big deal. Because if it's a big deal, that means Shurmur's upset about it. And I don't think there's anything. This is on the list of things that matters in this quarterback competition. This is about 150th.
Yeah. Yeah. Easily.
But I know some people are making a big deal out of this.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah. Anyway, what else, Cal?
All right. Last question coming in. Did they talk about Killen's very interested in what he's going to do a part-time Mike Boone fix?
I'll tell you. You look at Killens. He does. You see him with the running backs, and you're like, this guy doesn't belong. Like you look at the body type. Like he does look like a receiver. You look at his legs. You look at I was watching the running backs when they were getting ready to do their drills at the start of practice, and every other running back has got calves like tree trunks.
Yeah.
And Killens, I mean, he's just got little skinny lower legs.
He's a non-football athlete.
Yes, he is. And he's definitely more of somebody that you might think of as a wide receiver, as somebody that you're gonna, if he's in there, you're gonna motion him out, you're gonna try him out on a wheel route.
Right.
That if he's running between the tackles,
you
hold
did something
your
wrong.
breath.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're right. You did something wrong.
Yeah, something terrible happened. Yes.
But in all likelihood, he's just a guy that you want to get a look at.
Yeah.
You have the opportunity to get him reps because Mike Boone isn't around. If he impresses, great. If not, you move on. Remember, you have an expanded practice squad this year again, and liberalized practice squad rules again. So there is room to keep a guy like Killens, and maybe he fills the Levante Bellamy role. Bellamy was on the practice squad for a decent chunk of last year. Maybe he fills that role again.
Yeah.
Anything else good, Kale?
Just a follow-up to that. Can Killens push for the punt returner job?
Ooh, interesting question. Probably too late for that when they were working on punt return today. You saw Deontay Spencer and KJ Hamler. Now, we know Trinity Benson is in the mix as well, but they also want to find out about KJ Hamler's ball security. Now, to my knowledge, I don't think KJ Hamler has put a ball on the ground on punt returns so far. Good sign. Yeah. But at the same time, there's also judging the ball in flight, being in the right position. Yep. There was one that Sam Martin punted toward Martin's left to Hamler's right, and it was inside the 10-yard line around the sideline. And let's just say KJ was way too close to where that ball was, and that runs the risk of a Tony Carter kind of moment.
Yeah.
You remember back in 2013 when he's in the wrong place at the wrong time. Trenton Holiday was out there as well. But when you're too close to whether you're blocking or returning, if that ball is coming down near the sideline and you're too close, that's a problem because it bounces, it goes randomly off someone's leg, and all of a sudden you might have given your opponent first and goal. So that's the kind of thing that it's a subtle thing, but it's the kind of thing that KJ Hamler needs to do better if they're going to trust him on punt returns. I mean, Deontay Spencer, it took him a while in 2019, but he has become a very good judge of the ball in flight.
Yeah.
Very secure in how he fields the ball. And so Deontay Spencer may not have an offensive role, but he probably is Tom McMahon's whoopee, security blanket, call it what you will.
Yeah. And Trinity Benson, an interesting one, kind of a
He's another
sneaky
guy, like Mooty's saying, I dare you not to play me, and Trinity's saying, I dare you not to keep me on the 53
100%.
Because I belong on this 53, and he's damn good.
And he's not quite a scat back, but he's kind of an offensive playmaker, similar to,
You could see him developing into a slot, though.
Totally.
Yeah.
Plus return skills?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that'll keep him around for a long time. We've got more on the other side that we're going to record. Of course, we're going to do the comments next. So if you're listening on the podcast, stay tuned. We've got plenty more. For those of you watching on the live stream, thank you for joining us here from the DNVR bar. He's Andre Simone. I'm Andrew Mason. Thanks for watching. And for those of you listening, stay tuned. We've got plenty more to come on the comment section.